You're truly in luck. We're still here in Peru, Indiana, the home of the Miamis. And Butterfly has been our tour guide, lucky enough. I had to threaten her, but she's still willing to help us. And I'd like to take you down their museum wall, basically, of history. Sarah?
So in this panel here, it discusses a lot of the more modern history. It talks about how today Miami are clustered not only in Indiana, but we have several Miamis that live out of state. And some of the battles and some of the things that we've had throughout the years, it seems like the government has always wanted to kind of annihilate us and assimilate us. And so some of these panels are a way of showing, that we are still here today, that we do have, direct roots to our tribal histories and cultures, but yet, we are still, alive and vibrant in today's society.
This is one of my favorite panels here because of that house that they live in. You see, I'm from the Longhouse, and this is the same structure, except it's round like a hogan. And this is called a
Wikiyami, or a wickiup. And most of our wikiyamis were made, the mats themselves are made from cattails. But of course, I'm sure, in different years and different times, we would have used bark from trees and such. And the special thing about wikiyamis and wickiups is the ventilation system that they have in them. And so, most of the time we'd have a small fire in the center of the wikiyami. Usually there was a flap up here that kind of helped ventilate some of the smoke to go up and out of the wikiyami instead of spread out through, so you were always inhaling smoke. But the intricate thing is down along the bottom, there were little air laps built into the bottom of it. So the ventilation and the air would come through that bottom and help that force that smoke up through the top. And that was kind of our claim to fame with our wikiyamis, is the way that the ventilation, we had that quote-unquote ventilation system, within them.
Now this so resembles a hogan for the Navajos. And they had the door, the story there was, they look almost identical except for they are stacks of trees with mud, this bark and then mud over the top because of the intense heat. Mm-hmm. The door always faces east, and there's the hole in the roof can never be closed because you need contact with Father Sky.
Correct.
Yep, and it's almost identical. Now, we talked in the other chapter about the headdress and the traditional, but as you go back 1,000 years, I would think, this would be a sketch of...
Yes, that is a sketch of Pecan. Pecan was Little Turtle, one of our most revered war chiefs. That is his uncle. And so you see he has a scalp lock in the back. And then these here kind of looks like a necklace or something of that type, but that was actually tattoos.
I was going to ask if tattoos were popular because I'm starting to see, as you get away from the ocean states, more tattoos. Mm-hmm. Okay, and also very interesting, this sketch of the rivers. These are the two rivers. One here was the
St. Mary's.
Here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then the St. Joe's here.
Now, where these rivers met, the portals, were critical in the trade routes.
Right.
So this being there was very critical that they held control of that. And if you look, these are the tribes.
Right.
Miami.
Yep. There's the Miami and the Shawnee. And we had a conglomerate of Shawnees and Delawares. And then keep in mind, a lot of our tribal history here, this doesn't really depict some of the relationship and the intermingling with the Potawatomis as well. And so a lot of, the Shawnee, the Delaware, the Miami, the Potawatomi were all in a general area type of together and kind of banded forces in times, especially during Harmar's defeat, St. Clair's defeat, where you had to, kind of band together. I'm sure, I know there aren't maybe necessarily direct stories about it, but I'm almost sure that we had, warriors from the different groups to come and to our assistance and aid in time of need.
And this is 1790, so they're, when I see Delaware, is this from the eastern part of the Delaware?
Yes. yes.
So they're
yes.
coming here for protection, or
Yes,
is this their
yes.
hunting grounds?
No, this was, I think, a group of Delaware that came and fled their area for protection.
Because you see Delaware and Oklahoma on the relocation program.
Correct.
This up here?
Know much about that.
Okay.
Little Turtle was one of our most revered war chiefs, like I mentioned before. He led two of the most bloodiest battles ever on American soil. You don't really hear about that too much. I think sometimes the government likes to not try to,
Well, when they teach you American history, it's got nothing to do with
Little
America.
Turtle, right?
Or
Right.
Indians, really. It's just, but. So this is the property that he controlled?
Well, not necessarily
There.
controlled. Little Turtle, like I said, was a war chief, and so he of any of our, I think, warriors kind of understood that even though he was a tribal leader, a lot of those the leadership of the tribe was really controlled by its elders, and the general council. But being a war chief, a lot of his actions, shape the tribe as it is today. I mean, really, you have St. Clair's defeat, and then you have Harmar's defeat, and those were the two that I referred to that were had the bloodiest ever on American soil. I think the years 1790 and 1791.
Now, the Bundys start showing up, the name Bundy starts showing up, and here's a picture of their house.
So the Bundy family is unique in the sense that a lot of them derive or are related to Frances Slocum. Frances Slocum was a white captive, and she actually was taken by a different tribe, and then in turn, one of our clan chiefs, his name was Shapakinake, which meant deaf man, and he had a small village that is actually south of town here. But Frances Slocum found him wounded in the woods, nursed him to health, and they eventually married each other. And I'm not sure how old she was at that time, but I do know that the Delaware husband that she had at the time, or before that, was not nice to her at all. And so there we have many stories of Frances Slocum. We have a video about Frances Slocum, and she is one of the most revered relatives of the Miami family. And in fact, our vice chief today is directly related to her. He is her 7th great-grandson. We also have 2 tribal council members that are direct descendants of Frances Slocum as well.
Now, here's one of the more interesting things that I've seen in this museum. And this goes through, can you go through the timeline here?
So, yeah, so that discusses kind of the invasion, if you will, of different people at different times and points of the years. So you can see, that, and I don't know how accurate the numbers actually really truly are, but it kind of it shows you, and it proves a point. In 1830, there were 6,000 native people and 3,000 settlers. When you go down to 1840, it says that there are only 800 natives here, and the amount of settlers has risen quite enormously. And then in 1850, it even gets shorter,
Almost to extinction.
Yes and no. I think a lot of...
in this area.
In this area, a lot of the events that were happening in this area determined how they came up with those numbers. In 1846, we had the Indian Removal Act. So then in 1854, our tribe was split. And so a lot of our people were hiding. A lot of our the people in the areas, even some families in the area, hid some of our people. And so I don't think it was necessarily one of those things where you came out and said, yes, I'm native, because then they would just take you in, remove you to Kansas.
I grew up in that same frame, that same thought of mine. But I point out that chart there of numbers because there's a common thread here that I've followed all the way through the Mattaponi, the Pamunkey, and at least 30 different nations that were devastated in a 20 to 50 year period, where they went from numbers of 8,000 down to numbers of 600, or here 6,000 down to 250 in this area that they have been in for thousands of years.
Right. So that's Jean-Baptiste Bruyere. And this panel is kind of depicting some of the more lavendish materials that we might have traded with, and in turn some of our chiefs kind of wore. And so you can see here, even he doesn't have a traditional, what you refer to as a plain style headdress. It's more of a feathered plume. A lot of our gentlemen had turbans, made of otter skin, different types of skins.
Well, the thing that a lot of people don't realize, and that I've come to find, is the trade routes back even 1,000 years ago and further were incredible, because we have found Spanish helmets all the way to the Arctic Circle, and clubs and pistols and stuff from South America.
Oh yeah.
So the trade routes, there was nothing shy. You could have anything you wanted in the ostrich plumes and everything else from all over the world.
Right.
All you had to do is have the money to get it.
Right. So this is probably our most important board, at least it is to me. This depicts the removal. In October of 1846, they started the removal. They gathered our people up and put them on canal boats and shipped them to Kansas, or tried to ship them to Kansas. And when I mean gathered, they forcibly gathered a lot of our people, which in turn made a lot of our people fled, would flee. A lot of them, were either hidden in different communities in the area. There were 5 families that were allowed to stay, and I think some of those 5 families even, tried to keep as many folks and as many of their people here as possible. And so this event right here is what has created the Miami tribe to have 2 separate tribes, one that remains in the homeland and one that has been removed, illegally removed from their family and taken to Kansas. They were in Kansas for a number of years, and then the government decided, hey, we want the land in Kansas. So you folks in Kansas, you can stay and become citizens, and for lack of a better phrase, you won't be native anymore. You're no longer Miami. It's like me, and you could stay here, or we'll remove you and we'll put you on this land in Oklahoma. It's great land. Okay.
Red
keep
dirt.
in mind, yes, this is all around the late 1800s, turn of the centuries. The government had already removed people to Oklahoma. And so our people were forced into a spot of land where there were already 5 or 6 other tribes there.
Well, there's actually 39. There was 39, I found out.
Correct. So they incorporated in what's called the Quapaw Agency, which is a conglomerate of different tribes in that area that banded together to, lack of a better way to say it, support each other. Yeah. And so some of their traditions they have kept, as far as our woodlands, but some of them have assimilated and for lack of, it created their own kind of camaraderies and cultures down there as well, and that's their own history, apart from ours.
All right, let's continue this. I'm going to pause and go on to